My stepmom looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not going with us. This trip is for a real family." I remember the room going quiet, like someone had turned off the sound in my head. What she didn't say out loud was worse. They still planned to spend 10 days at my lake house, without me. The same house I owned, the same house I had cleaned and prepared for them. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I made one calm decision that changed everything. When they arrived, I learned silence could cut deeper than any argument. Like, comment where you're listening. My name is Hannah. I'm in my late 20s, I work a regular office job in the city, and for most of my life, I've been the kind of person who believes problems can be solved if you're patient enough, if you stay quiet, if you don't make things harder than they need to be. I didn't grow up wealthy or dramatic. What I had was stable, warm, especially before everything changed. Some of my earliest memories are of summers at the lake house, bare feet on cold wooden floors in the morning, the smell of pine drifting through open windows, my mom humming while she made breakfast, my dad already outside checking the water level like it was his job. That house felt like the one place where nothing bad could reach us. Then my mom got sick. It happened fast. One year she was there, the next she wasn't. After the funeral, the lake house stopped feeling like a vacation spot and started feeling like a memory we were afraid to touch. My dad tried. I'll give him that. He tried to be strong, tried to keep things normal. But grief changed him in ways I didn't understand yet. A few years later, he remarried. My stepmom moved in with her 2 daughters, and overnight the energy of our home shifted. Not loudly, not in obvious ways. It was subtle. Furniture rearranged, photos replaced. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. I was never yelled at. I was simply edited out. When I went away for school, coming home felt strange, like I needed permission. When I finally moved into my own apartment and started working full-time, that distance became my shield. I told myself it was fine. Adults drift, families change. The lake house came back into my life through my mom's side of the family. My aunt had always loved that place, and when she passed, it was left to me, legally, fully. No confusion, no shared ownership, just mine. I should have sold it. That would have been the practical choice. But something in me couldn't. That house held the version of my family that once felt real. When my dad and stepmom started asking about using it once in a while, I said yes. I wanted to believe generosity could fix what distance hadn't. I wanted to feel included again. So when they suggested a summer vacation together, all of us under one roof, I felt hopeful, genuinely hopeful. I told myself this was our reset, our chance to finally act like a family again. I had no idea I was preparing my own replacement. The idea of the trip came up casually, like it wasn't a big deal. We were sitting in my dad's living room, the TV on low, something forgettable playing in the background. My stepmom mentioned how nice it would be to get away together before summer ended. A few days by the water, fresh air, time to reconnect. She said it like it was already decided. I looked at my dad. He smiled and nodded the same way he always did when he didn't want to argue. "It could be good for all of us," he said. I felt something loosen in my chest. I didn't realize how badly I'd been waiting to hear that. From that moment on, I threw myself into the planning. I drove up to the lake house on my days off. I aired out rooms that hadn't been used in months, washed sheets, took inventory of what we'd need, groceries, basics, things people never think about until they're already there and annoyed. Every time I stood on the dock watching the water ripple, I told myself this was worth it. That effort meant something, that families didn't heal overnight, but they healed through showing up. There were small moments that didn't sit right. My stepmom talked about the sleeping arrangements without asking me. She invited her daughter's partners without mentioning it until later. When I tried to chime in, she'd smile and say, "We'll figure it out," then change the subject. I ignored the tight feeling in my stomach. I told myself I was being sensitive. A few days before the trip, my dad asked me to come by. He said they wanted to go over details. I walked in with a notebook, already thinking about meals and timing. We didn't make it that far. My stepmom didn't sit down. She stayed standing, arms crossed loosely, like she was preparing to deliver bad news, but didn't want to seem cruel about it. She said my name once, slow. Then she said, "We've decided it would be better if you didn't come on this trip." I laughed at first. Just a breath of disbelief. "What do you mean?" She didn't hesitate. This is really about family bonding, a real family vacation. The words landed heavy. Final. I turned to my dad. He stared at his hands. I waited. Seconds stretched. He never looked up. I asked him quietly if that was how he felt too. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said nothing at all. That silence did more damage than any argument could have. I stood there holding my notebook, realizing how ridiculous it was that I'd planned meals for people who didn't even want me at the table. My stepmom added that they'd already taken time off work, that everything was arranged, that I could use the house later, as if she were offering me a favor. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I nodded once, said I understood, and left. In my car, my hand shook so badly I had to sit there for a minute before turning the key. That was when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't thoughtless planning. They had made a choice, and my father had let it happen. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, the hurt had burned itself into something colder, and I knew deep down I wasn't going to beg to be included ever again. That night, my apartment felt smaller than it ever had. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and stood there staring at the wall, replaying the conversation over and over. The way my stepmom's voice never wavered, the way my dad couldn't meet my eyes, the way I'd walked out carrying a notebook full of plans no one wanted me to be part of. I didn't cry right away. I paced, back and forth from the kitchen to the window like my body needed to burn off the shock before my mind could catch up. I kept thinking about the phrase she'd used, real family. It echoed in my head until it stopped hurting and started sounding ridiculous. If I wasn't real family, then why had I been good enough to clean the house, to stock the fridge, to hand over the keys without question? That's when the anger finally settled in. Not loud, not explosive. It was the quiet kind, the kind that makes things suddenly very clear. I picked up my phone and almost called my dad. Then I set it back down. I already knew how that conversation would go. Apologies wrapped in excuses, promises that changed nothing. I wasn't going to beg him to choose me again. Instead, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the documents tied to the lake house. Deed, ownership, everything in my name. Clear, simple, no loopholes, no shared control. I read through it slowly twice just to be sure I wasn't missing something. I wasn't. For the first time since that conversation, my breathing steadied. I didn't tell anyone what I was about to do, not my friends, not my dad. I didn't post anything. I didn't hint. I just made a plan and stuck to it. 2 days later, I took time off work and drove to the lake house early. The road felt different this time, not nostalgic, focused. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was quiet exactly how I'd left it, peaceful, waiting. I walked through every room, checking windows, doors, the back deck. I sat at the kitchen table for a moment and let myself feel it. The sadness, the anger, the finality of what I was about to change. Then I called a locksmith. He worked quickly, replacing the locks without asking questions. The sound of metal clicking into place felt heavier than it should have, like something permanent was being sealed. When he handed me the new keys, they were cold in my palm. I paid him, thanked him, and stood there alone after he left. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. That night, I cooked a simple dinner and ate it on the deck as the sun dipped behind the trees. The water was still. The air smelled like pine and warm wood. This place had always been about safety, about belonging. I realized something then. If they had decided I wasn't family, I didn't owe them access to the one place that still felt like home. I locked the door before bed and slept better than I had in weeks. Tomorrow, they would arrive expecting everything to be exactly the way they'd left it. They had no idea how wrong they were. I woke up early that morning, even though I hadn't set an alarm. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I heard the water, soft, steady, brushing against the dock. The lake house always woke up slowly, like it didn't believe in rushing anything. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the light stretch across the surface of the lake. I checked the time. They should be about an hour away. I didn't feel nervous. That surprised me. I thought I would be shaking, rehearsing speeches in my head, but there was nothing to rehearse. I already knew what I was going to say. More importantly, I knew what I wasn't going to say. I wasn't going to explain myself. Around noon, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. One car, then another. I stayed where I was and let it happen. Through the front window, I saw them pull into the driveway like they owned the place. Doors opened. Laughter carried across the yard. My stepmom gestured toward the house, pointing, probably assigning rooms the same way she always did. My dad unloaded bags from the trunk, moving automatically like he always did. I noticed how relaxed they looked. That almost made me smile. Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out the key. She walked up the front steps confidently and slid it into the lock. Nothing happened. She turned it again, harder this time. I watched her body stiffen. My dad stepped closer, took the key from her, and tried it himself. He jiggled the handle, frowned, tried again, still nothing. One of her daughters rolled her eyes and said something I couldn't hear. Someone laughed, assuming it was a glitch. They moved to the back door. Same result. That's when the energy shifted. Rebecca's shoulders went tight. Her voice carried now sharp and irritated. She knocked once, then harder. "Hannah," she called. "What is this?" I waited a beat longer than necessary. Then I walked to the door. I didn't swing it open. I unlocked the chain just enough to open it a few inches and looked out at them calmly like I'd just been interrupted during a normal day. "Yes," I said. "Can I help you?" Rebecca's face flushed. "What did you do to the locks?" "Oh," I said, like it had just occurred to me. "I had them changed." Her mouth opened, then closed. "Why would you do that?" I shrugged lightly. "Because this is my house." One of her daughters stepped forward. "We're supposed to be staying here." "I know," I said. "You told me." My dad finally spoke. "Hannah, this isn't funny. We drove all this way. I'm not joking," I said. My voice didn't rise. "I just made a decision." Rebecca crossed her arms. "You can't just lock us out. We already planned everything." "That's interesting," I said, "because last week you told me this trip was for family only." She stiffened. "Don't twist my words." "I'm not," I said. I listened very carefully. My dad looked between us. "You know that's not what she meant." I turned to him. "Then what did she mean?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. Rebecca stepped in front of him. "We meant this was time for us, for our family." I nodded slowly. "Right. And you were very clear that I'm not part of that." Her jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being consistent." One of her daughters scoffed. "So you're seriously doing this?" "Yes." Rebecca laughed, sharp and humorless. "This is childish. You're punishing everyone because your feelings got hurt." I leaned against the doorframe. "I didn't punish anyone. I just decided not to lend my home to people who don't consider me family." She stared at me, stunned. "We have a right to be here." "You don't," I said. "You have a habit of assuming you do." That's when my dad finally stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Hannah, please, let's talk about this inside." I met his eyes. "There is no inside for you today." Rebecca's voice rose. "You're being selfish." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I learned that word from watching you." She pointed at the door. "Open it." I shook my head. "I won't let strangers in my house." The words hung there, heavy and unmistakable. For a second, no one spoke. Then everything exploded at once. Accusations, guilt, raised voices. Rebecca said I was cruel. One daughter said I was ruining everything. My dad kept repeating my name like it might unlock the door if he said it enough times. I listened. I really did. And I felt nothing. No urge to defend myself. No need to justify my choice. They weren't listening now, and they hadn't listened before. The difference was, this time, it didn't matter. I stepped back and reached for the door. Rebecca lunged forward. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said. I closed the door and locked it. They stayed out there for a while. I could hear muffled shouting, the sound of bags being dropped back onto the gravel. At one point, my dad knocked softly, once then again. I didn't answer. Eventually, engines started. I stood by the window and watched them leave. The driveway emptied. The lake stayed still. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. Later that evening, my friends arrived. Their cars filled the space my family had vacated. Laughter returned, but this time it felt different. Easy, earned. We grilled food on the deck. We swam. We stayed up late telling stories under the stars. No one walked on eggshells. No one questioned whether they belonged. That night, as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I realized something important. Power doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it comes from deciding who gets access to you. And for the first time in a long time, that decision was mine. The house felt different after they left. Not quiet or lighter. My friends stayed for a few days, and for the first time in years, the lake house felt like it belonged to the present instead of the past. We cooked simple meals, swam until our skin wrinkled, laughed late into the night. No tension, no guessing where we stood with each other. No one made me feel like I had to earn my place at the table. When they went home, I stayed. I blocked my stepmom and her daughters without hesitation. No speeches, no explanations. I was done trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. A week later, my dad asked to meet, just the two of us. We chose a small cafe in the city-neutral ground. He looked older somehow, like the weight he'd avoided had finally settled. He apologized. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but honestly. I didn't forgive him on the spot. I told him the truth that trust doesn't come back just because someone finally says the right words. If we were going to have a relationship, it would be slow, careful, on my terms. He agreed. And for the first time, I believed him. When I got home that night, I made another decision. I contacted a real estate agent and asked about renting out the lake house seasonally, turning it into something practical, something that worked for me instead of draining me. As I closed my laptop, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. That summer taught me something I wish I'd learned sooner. Family isn't defined by blood or labels, but by respect. The moment someone decides you don't belong, they lose the right to your time, your space, and your generosity. Choosing yourself isn't cruel, it's necessary. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear from you. Share where you're listening from and whether you've ever had to draw a hard line with someone you loved. And if you want more real stories about family boundaries and finding your strength, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one.